Podcast, episode number 8. My name is James, and today I'm excited to be joined by Pete Quinones of the Free Man Beyond the Wall podcast and the Libertarian Institute. As always, you can find today's show notes at urbanagorist.com/8. And before we get started with Pete, I want to remind you that the Seed Summit begins tomorrow, November 17th, 2020. It's not too late to sign up for this free education in food sovereignty. You'll learn how to acquire bulk seeds, how to store those seeds for long-term planning, how to create a seed library in your area, how seeds can be adapted for extreme climates, and much, much more. If you're interested in food sovereignty and self-sufficiency, you won't want to miss this important event. Head to urbanagorist.com/summit to get signed up for free today. And with that, let's get into it with Pete Quinones. Pete, thanks for joining me today. Why don't you introduce yourself to the audience in case they're not familiar with you?
Pete Quinones, host of the Free Man Beyond the Wall podcast, one of the co-executive producers of the Monopoly on Violence documentary, managing editor at Libertarian Institute, and all around just way too much on my plate kind of guy.
Yeah. In addition to a bunch of other stuff, I mean, you're sort of a god on Twitter almost. So that's pretty great. You also are an agorist or an agorist. I don't know which pronunciation you prefer.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah, me neither. You're kind of the one who gave me permission to look back into it, actually. We were on a live stream a few months ago, actually, with Monica Perez, and you kind of came out as an agorist on that live stream. What made you take the jump from like kind of conventional ANCAP political libertarian to like a full-on agorist, rejecting the political realm altogether?
Well, honestly, I just don't think that anarcho-capitalists have a plan. They don't have any kind of strategy, really. I mean, people can say whatever they want about the agorist strategy, but at least it's a strategy. I mean, here, read this book. That's not really a strategy, and it's something that I used for a lot of years. And I wish I would have embraced my agorist roots. I mean, I've been an agorist my whole life. I wish I would have embraced those roots a lot earlier. It's not that I don't like anarcho-capitalism. I just don't think that it's, like I said, there's no strategy there. I mean, I know Hoppe has a strategy with, what must be done, things like that, getting involved locally. But I pretty much even with COVID-19 and with the growing technocratic state and really what I see coming as being the hell that the original technocrats in the 19 teens and 20s and 30s were talking about and preaching. Now I see everything that they were writing about coming into existence. I don't even see, maybe there's hopes for local, maybe there's hopes for federalism, maybe there's hopes for secession. Who knows? I'll have a better idea of that after the election. After the election, I'm going to, as I think everyone should, re-strategize, take a look at the landscape and see exactly what's happening. And remember, we may not even know what the results of the election are for months. So, yeah, I mean, the thing that really made me start talking about agorism was just watching the public's response to the government's response to COVID-19 and watching the public just basically become good little, drones. And for the most part, most people not being willing to do anything about it and not being willing to fight back. And, if you're just one lone nut out there, well, they're just going to take you out and they'll paint you as the lone nut. But if a bunch of people, if a lot of people, if millions of people are like, no, we're not going to put up with this. This is garbage. We could have the state could have been irrelevant this year. And there's arguments to make that the state is irrelevant. They seem to lack a lot of power without the public's, without the public saying, yes, we trust you on this, on our health, on our our future, on our wealth. And I think there was a real chance this year that you could have seen a huge pushback and the state could have gotten smaller, but people wanted to be safe. They got scared of an invisible enemy. They got scared of being sick. And yeah, here we are in technocratic hell and talking about mandatory vaccines and talking about, if you don't accept the vaccine, you don't get to go to the supermarket. You don't get to go to work. You don't get this. You don't get that. And it just basically destroyed medicine this year, destroyed any kind of relationship that you would have with your doctor, destroyed any relationship that you can have with older people in your family other than, Zoom or phone calls. And they've basically destroyed society. And I don't see a political solution to that unless masses and masses of people decide that they're just going to say, no, we're not going to do this. So that's why I jumped. That was a long road to why I've been promoting agorism strongly for the last 8 months.
The last time we faced sort of a quote invisible enemy was in the post 9/11 world, and obviously Al Qaeda is not invisible, or was not invisible at the time. They kind of are now, actually. But the red light, green light, yellow light system that they kind of built up, where all of a sudden we were under a terrorist threat higher today than it was yesterday, seems like there's a lot of parallels there. Between then and now. Do you think now is worse than then? Are we blowing this out of proportion? Or is it a continuation of that?
It's both. It's a continuation and it's worse. After 9/11, the TSA, that's not gone away. Yeah. But, Tom Wood says it rightly. Comparing like the masks and the TSA is kind of hard because most people don't fly, maybe once a year. So the TSA is really not a headache to them, not for people who, like myself, who try to fly 7, 8, 9 times a year, where it's a pain. But now what we've seen is, and what we saw, universal spying, the Patriot Act, all of that. The main difference is where you knew pretty much after 9/11, you knew what the hijackers looked like. They look like guys from the Middle East, okay? Now anyone is a witch. Now anyone is possessed and could possibly, put a spell on you that you're going to catch and it's going to shut your lungs down and, and it's going to kill you, just like it's, like you're a 40-year-old healthy person, but you're pretending like you're 85 years old and in a nursing home and, and usually on oxygen normally. It's just made people mush. I mean, it's really, when I look at, I think of certain movies. One movie I really haven't thought about and talked about is the movie WALL-E, where everyone in the future is basically on a ship and they're fed and they're just blobs and masses and they're just existing. And that's pretty much a lot of people right now. And a lot of people want to live like that because they're scared of an invisible enemy. It's really kind of genius that someone figured out that you can only say so much about, Middle Eastern people. It's like, oh, I have Middle Eastern people in my neighborhood I've known for years. I know they're not terrorists and everything. But when your family members could potentially kill you just by being in the same room with you, this is unbelievable. I mean, it's absolute madness that people have literally changed the culture forever because they're scared to get sick. And now, they graduated from deaths to cases. And what is cases? Somebody tests positive for antibodies. Is that a case? Somebody tests for it who, has no symptoms whatsoever other than they can't taste or smell. Is that a case? I mean, how dangerous are they? It's like, is this what we're scared of? Are we worried about them? Are we worried about what they're going to do to other people? It's bizarre. I mean, it just doesn't. I don't understand how people aren't waking up every day and being mad over this, because it's maddening. It's insane. And I just, at this point, all I really know what to do is to take care of myself and to just keep trying to get the message out there, trying to deliver it in different ways. And, apparently facts don't matter anymore. Statistics don't matter anymore. Mm-hmm. So you just have to sort of try to find new ways to communicate with people.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's frustrating.
It kind of puts Ben Shapiro's old tagline on its head. Feelings don't care about your facts now.
Yeah. Yeah.
What do you think? So recently the WHO and Anthony Fauci and even now the New York Times have all kind of come out against lockdowns. And the governor of my state was on TV just this week saying, no, there's no more plans for lockdowns. What do you think that is?
As far as I can tell, I think it proves that people aren't even believing these people anymore. Mm-hmm. I mean, people still want the lockdowns. People still are like, I'm going to stay home until there's a vaccine. I had someone the other day tell me that I'll finally take this mask off when there's a vaccine. And I asked them very, very nicely, what if it doesn't work? And people aren't even thinking about that. That isn't even a consideration in their mind.
Yeah.
They've bought into this scientism, this, it's like, I'm waiting for the magic elixir so that, because it'll defeat the spirit. It'll defeat the evil spirit that's out there. Well, what do you want? I mean, I've had somebody on my podcast who, Knut Witkowski, who has the cure for it. He says this is, if you don't have it, you take it as a precaution when there's an announcement that there's something out there, that there's a new coronavirus or whatever out there, and you just take it as a precaution. Take it a couple times a day, and it'll soak up any virus that gets into your blood, and you'll urinate it out. But that's just not magical enough, I guess. They need the magical elixir to, I would not be shocked at this point that, when somebody's getting the vaccine, if there's going to be someone burning sage behind them, because that's pretty much the attitude that I see now when it comes to medicine. Mm-hmm. Is it used to be about, the best way not to get sick is to be healthy. Just have a strong immune system to fight things off. And it made sense. That doesn't make sense anymore. You have people who argue it now. You have people who say that you're trying to have, if you talk about herd immunity or something like that, you're trying to have, experiments in human sacrifice, things like that. And it's like, where's this come from other than they have a political agenda? And if they have a political agenda, you have to ask, what is it? And when you start looking at things like the Great Reset and things like that, you very clearly see that they're learning, that these people who have the levers of power are learning. They see, hey, these people locked down for a virus. How much more will they lock down if we tell them the environment's poisoned? And we need to do something about global warming, so they're going to need to stay home and work from home. And so we're going to have to restructure the whole economy. And, I read the technocratic movement from the early 1900s, where they talk about how you're going to earn energy credits, and that's what you're going to use to buy the supplies that you need, food and water, things like that. And they expire after a time. And why do they expire? That way no one can build up wealth. So if you're earning all these credits by you're working, or maybe you're not working, and they're giving you these credits so you can pay your rent, you can pay for your food, you can pay for whatever. Well, if you don't use the credits, then they have an expiration date. So you can never no one will ever be able to save for wealth again, become wealthy again, because that's what they wrote about in the 1930s, said a way to keep people from becoming richer than other people. And that's just one of the examples that, like, the World Economic Forum is taking from all the way back then and trying to use now. And, anyone who's on Twitter has seen the World Economic Forum talking about by 2030, no one's going to own anything, and they're going to love it. No one's going to have possessions, and they're going to love it. All right.
And that article, the thing, I don't own anything and I'm loving it, that came out years ago. That's nothing new. Mm-hmm. That article was written in like 2015.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Yeah. I mean, they've been planning this for so long. You talk about, like, I talk about Technocracy Inc., which was like the 1920s. Mm-hmm. And people are like, well, it's just a conspiracy theory. I'm like, okay, go back and read what they were writing. Read what their plans were for society. Now, see if any of those plans are being implemented. Do you know how many of them have been implemented in the last 8 months, or at least strongly considered in the last 8 months? It's pretty psychotic. I mean, it's all happening right now, and people their eyes aren't open to it. And it's just because people aren't, I don't know. I think people have lost their skepticism. Mm-hmm. I think people have lost everything. I think they've lost hope. They've lost skepticism. I think that everyone, for the most part, I would say 99% of humanity right now is just marching forward. Maybe part of them are 100% in line with whatever the elites say they want to do. Another section of them are just looking to see what's going to happen. And then there's this tiny little sliver down here who's like, nah, man, this is just insane what they're planning and what they're putting in, what they're doing. And nobody's upset about it. And when you show them exactly what they're doing and what their plans have been for 100 years, they're like, that's a conspiracy theory. All right. Hey, I don't want to be the person, I would rather it not happen than me have to say, I told you so. Because, I mean, I told you so. All that means when it comes to important stuff like this is that we're all screwed.
Who do you know the names of some of the people that you're referring to, the technocrat movement? I'm not actually familiar with it.
I'd have to pull out like Patrick Wood's book.
Okay, that's fine.
Technocracy. Yeah. Yeah, they're not household names, but when you come forward to 1973 and the formation of the Trilateral Commission, a lot of those names you'll know that you'll have Kissinger names in there, you'll have Brzezinski names in there, and they're basically picking up the mantle of the technocrats and moving it forward. So. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the fact that so many of those like ancient people are still alive, even to me, is fishy. So I'm going to switch gears a little bit. You earlier said that you were getting back to your agorist roots and that you've kind of always been an agorist. What started it? What was like the very first thing that you did to sort of opt out?
I mean, I can go all the way back to childhood. I mean, we would trade stuff amongst ourselves. We would, I remember the first really, really nice pair of hockey gloves I ever bought were like $60 or $65 brand new. And I think it was my dad. I can't remember if it was my dad or my uncle who like came to the house and he's like, if you want these, they're $20. And I'm like, so how are these $20? I know they're $60 at Paragon's. And he's like, well, they fell off the back of a truck. Don't ask any questions. and that was pretty much growing up it was so much stuff that we had. It was all black market stuff in the house. And I remember the first time we could ever afford to go on vacation when I was a kid, it was because my dad hit the number. Do you know what that is?
No.
In New York, there were these, it was a network of betting parlors that were completely illegal. Police knew about them. It was mob. It was mob run, and you would go there and you'd be like, okay, I'm going to put $20 on this number coming out today, and the number would always somehow be tied to, like the total payout horse racing at of the horses at like Aqueduct in New York, where they had daily horse races. And yeah, my dad, the first time we ever went on vacation, which I think we went to Florida, and then we went to we were like in Florida for a week, and then Puerto Rico for a week, and then back home. That was completely paid for by money that my dad made. Wow. Gambling illegally. So I mean, I grew up around in an environment where I was not. It wasn't looked down upon to do illegal stuff, and to buy hot, things that were hot, quote unquote. And so, that just continued as I got to be an adult. I would, look for something, and if I needed something, I'd see if I could get it on the street first, because it would always be cheaper. And that just kept going and going and going. As I got older, I started. I did have a business that was completely off the books and completely black market that I ran for 5 years, and to this day I do agorist things in my life. I mean, I have a straight job, but I do agorist things in my life that I don't what I do right now I don't talk about, just because yeah, they're they can really get some heat brought down on me. But yeah, it's just part of my life. It's always been part of my life. It was just never frowned upon when you grow up poor in New York City or anywhere. It's like my mom's relatives out in Western Pennsylvania. For 100 years, they've been making shine out there and selling it, and that's like their major source of income. So I mean, that's just, it was never. When I realized that there was actually a term for it, an agorism, and that somebody had written a couple books about it, that was interesting to see somebody tying Austrian economics into it, which was actually very nice, very extremely interesting. Made me want to read the books, which I did. Read them a couple times, and yeah, I mean, it's just, I think that it's really one of the great ways to starve the state, but also have access to things that the government says you can't. So,
yeah, for sure. So you spent some time in seminary, right, or theology school of some sort?
Yeah, I went to seminary.
What brought you there? How did that? How did you go from black market kid to seminarian?
It just, in my late 20s, I started going to church, and I'm one of those people that if I start doing something, I want to know everything about it. Mm-hmm. It was like when I became a libertarian, I wanted to start reading all the libertarian literature possible, and I was much the same way. So I had the pastor of the church I was going to had graduated from this seminary. So he called up and he said, look, this guy, he's 45 credits shy of an undergrad degree. Can I get him in there? And I want him to graduate and do the whole core and do all 3 years, but we just won't give him sheepskin until he gets those 45 credits. Is that cool? Mm-hmm. And his brother also graduated from the seminary. And then I knew a couple other people who were going at the time. They were very nice. They were very accommodating. And so I got to study and got to take enough courses that, as my dad used to say, that a lot of people go to seminary and they study so hard that they study themselves out of faith.
Yeah.
And that was me.
Yeah.
So so I went and learned everything that I possibly could, and I'm very, very well read when it comes to the Bible and also biblical history of like the Protestant Reformation. Mostly not really the Protestant Reformation, more along the lines of the teachings of the early Protestants. And especially like the Anabaptists and a lot of the English Puritans. And yeah, it was studying all that just sort of made me go, yeah, this, I I remember the first time I took a textual criticism course. It was hilarious because we had people in there that were auditing it, and technically I was an audit, but I was considered as a student. But we had there were women in there who were auditing it, and the seminary that I went to, it was a denomination that would never ordain a woman. So we start this textual criticism course. Within the first 10 minutes of him explaining, and he started with the Gospels. He's like, okay, this is what we know about where the Gospels came from. First 10 minutes, I'm hearing whispers from people next to me going, this is really scary. And what they were saying was, it's really scary that when you sit in a course and you find out in a textual criticism course and they start teaching you exactly what they know about the origins of the scripture, how you're immediately like, oh, so the origins is on faith too. Okay, got it. Okay, right. Okay, sure. Okay. And so that was pretty funny. But it was just stuff like that. It was just reading and getting into their library, which was absolutely amazing, and reading books that were off the curriculum and everything. And I was just like, this is all interesting. This is great history, but I don't believe this. I don't believe this stuff. I believe it is history. I believe a lot of it is allegory, but I don't take this on faith anymore.
So what would you have called yourself libertarian back then, or when did that come about?
I wouldn't have called myself libertarian back then. Back then, I probably would have definitely called myself Republican. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Libertarianism was 2007 with the first Ron Paul run. I was really I knew the government sucked and everything, but I just couldn't get the whole foreign policy thing after 9/11 just really confused the crap out of me. And Ron Paul pretty much explained it in like a couple seconds in a debate. And I'm like, oh, yeah, that's that's so easy. How could I not have come to that on my own? And so after I saw that, I started to do research into who Dr. Paul was, and I found out that he was a Libertarian Party candidate for president in 1988. And I saw a couple interviews where he talked about like Murray Rothbard and Ludwig von Mises. So I immediately, went to the internet and started Googling. And to think how old Google was at that time. What were they, 2?
Yeah.
Amazing. And just found those books and started reading. And that just took me down the rabbit hole for a couple years. And then I stopped studying that for a couple years. And then I started studying more not ancient religions, but Eastern religions. Oh. And I really concentrated on Eastern religions for like a good 4 years. And I wasn't reading anything libertarian. And then around 2015, I started reading again. I picked Rothbard back up, and Democracy, the God That Failed. And that brought me back in. And then ever since then, I've pretty much been full steam trying to do what I can to wake people out of their slumber and, realize the road we're going down.
I was, I got super deep into Catholicism. Similarly, I never went to seminary, obviously, but I studied the early church fathers probably in a lot of the same way that you studied the Protestant reformers and their sort of progeny. And I actually came to libertarianism through a Catholic blogger who is very anti-libertarian. He says libertarianism is an ideology for people without children. But hey, there's this guy who's anti-war and pro-life. So I guess he's my candidate this year, even though he's libertarian. And that's how I discovered Ron Paul, was through this Catholic blogger. And he also wrote a review of Tom Woods' book, How the Catholic Church Built Western Civilization. So that's how I discovered Tom Woods as well. And so I kind of left the Catholic rabbit hole and went down the libertarian rabbit hole because of this guy who really kind of detests libertarianism, which I'm sure he wouldn't appreciate too much, but I think I came out of it for the better anyway. You're also...
We had to read, even though it was Protestant, we had to read the early church fathers as well. So yeah. that's where I think a lot of the reason why I can pick up really dense libertarian manuscripts and be able to really to read them and to grasp them is from reading the early church fathers, is because it's not very easy reading.
Yeah.
And once you can do that, then it really changes your mind, and it really does change, almost like change your chemistry, where now I can do something that I couldn't do before. This book that would have been intimidating to me before now is digestible.
Yeah, I think that's one of the benefits, maybe one of the few benefits of formal education or schooling, is that you're kind of forced to read those original sources, and also you kind of learn how to do it. I am not very good at that, to be honest. Like, I can't read the church fathers and grasp everything that's written because I don't have a teacher telling me what they're saying, or at least what they think they're saying. So that's probably one of the benefits that you got out of seminary that has stuck with you. So you're also married to a libertarian influencer, kind of. I think I came across her before I came across you. How'd you meet Jen?
I've known Jen since shortly, a couple months after 9/11.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. We've known each other since 2001. And we were, the company I was working for at the time in South Florida, they hired her. So we were friendly and everything. And she worked there I think she worked there for 6 months, and then she left. And then she came back to work there like 6 months later. I think she came back to work there in like the ending of 2002. And at the time, she had a boyfriend, and I was doing missionary work overseas. So I was going back and forth from here and, just doing, it really wasn't missionary work at that point. I had lost my faith at that point. Mm-hmm. It was just me, basically a church group saying, can you come help us do this? And it was me like, yeah, okay, sure. Yeah, I can do it. Yeah. I had just had the time, and I wanted to. I still think that serving other people, I don't care if I don't believe that, whatever the Bible says to do, I still think in serving other people is important. I think that when you travel as much as I have, you start realizing that most people are really the same. I mean, everybody, and it's amazing how you can go halfway around the world and the person has the same sense of humor as you do, and they live in squalor. So I was going back and forth and everything, and she had a boyfriend and everything. And then, she broke up with her boyfriend, and like around 2003, we started, like in early 2003, we started dating. And and I was still going back and, making plans to go back and forth and everything. So after we started dating, we were together a while, and we just decided that we were going to stay together. So
that's pretty cool. So did you guys have kind of parallel journeys to libertarianism?
Oh, we both became libertarians watching that Ron Paul debate. We were watching it together in 2007. I mean, we lived together, and
yeah.
We were married by that time. We got married in Labor Day 2007. Okay. So and then it was, or it may have been, I don't remember I can't remember the date of the debate, but it may have been after that. It may have been before that, but it was 2007 Ron Paul. So it was right around the same time we got married too. So.
Yeah, I remember Matt Welch from Reason mentioned her on something. And so I followed her on Twitter because she was entertaining and funny and had good takes, from where I was coming from. So when I found out that you guys were together, that was that was kind of a surprise.
Bob Murphy just found out 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
And I know, Bob Murphy's been on my show. I've hung out with Bob Murphy at the Mises Institute, and he's just never put it together. And he slid up in my DMs like probably a week ago and said, and so there's still people who don't pick up on that.
Yeah.
So it's fine though. I mean, when it comes to libertarianism, we operate separately.
Yeah.
We don't. She's been on my show before. She's been on my show a few times. I've been on her show once, but we don't rely on, it's not like we're a team.
Yeah.
We're not this libertarian team. We're just, we happen to be, and she's more of a Reason Magazine libertarian, and I'm more of a Mises Institute libertarian. So, I mean, we have some differences, but, it's better than being married to a socialist.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Hey, were you at the Soho Forum debate where Danny Sturgeon and the guy from the Ayn Rand Institute were debating Israel and Palestine?
Sure was.
All right. So we have actually met before in person. This was back when you were Mance Raider, before you'd come out with your real name, and you were hanging out with Dave Smith. And so I shook hands with Dave Smith, and I was kind of starstruck, and you were there, and I was like, that looks just like Mance Raider. How weird. How did you get in with like the who's who of libertarianism? How did your star rise?
I probably have to give most of the credit to Scott Horton. When I wrote the little study guide to freedom through memedom, I asked Scott if he would do the introduction for it, like a forward for it. And of course he said yes, and then getting him to do it was like, dude, can you write this, please? I want to put the book out. I want to release the book. Can you write this and everything? But no, it was great. I mean, it came out right on time and everything. It wasn't like it needed to be out any earlier.
Yeah. And
so when I released it, I announced it on Twitter, and Scott retweeted it and was like, hey, I wrote the foreword for this. Check this out. This is like a really good study guide, basic libertarianism kind of thing. And like Dave Smith, like contacted me. I don't think he had followed me at that point. And he contacted me through DMs, and, he's like, hey, do you want to come on the show and talk about the book? And that's pretty much what started it down the road, and I, and then after I was on the show and we started talking a little bit, we were DMing, and I said, the dream is always to get on Tom Wood's show. And, so Dave's, Dave's like, hold up, let me see what I can do about that. So, and then, a couple weeks later, I was on Tom Wood's show, and that's really what started me off. I had a podcast at that point. My podcast would have been 6 months old at that point. Mm-hmm. And it started on YouTube only, and then I switched over to putting it on a podcast host. And that's when I started to see the download numbers start to go up and go up and go up. And, being on Dave's show subsequently, every time I've been on his show, I've seen a boost. Every time I've been on Tom's show, I've seen a boost in my download numbers. A lot of this year, when COVID started, I think a lot of libertarian podcasters didn't want to talk about it all the time. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to concentrate on it hard.
Yeah.
And I think that really helped me to have an explosion of a crowd. An explosion of downloads was being one of the people who was like, this is insane. Ron Paul was right from the start. This is a hoax. And, we need to do something about it. And talking about agorism too, I think brought some people over. But yeah, I mean, that's pretty much the, I owe it to being on show like Dave's show and being on Tom's show, being on Lions of Liberty, and, having them being nice enough to come on my show, and, people being like, hey, why would those two big guys, why does Scott Horton go on his show all the time and everything like that? And, that helps. That helps a lot too.
Tell me about Freedom Through Memedom. I know it's a few years old now, but
it's awful.
It's
I so want to rewrite it, but I just don't have time to.
Yeah.
It's just basically a 31-day guide to voluntarism that has no nuance whatsoever. It's just like, you either love the state or you hate the state. And if you love the state, you're the enemy. And if you hate the state, you're on my side. And like I said, there's no nuance whatsoever when it comes to anything, pretty much anything. If I wrote it now, it would probably be a lot longer because I would expound upon some of the ideas. But the idea for it was to be something that was so simple and included memes that you could give it to a friend. And even if the friend just threw it on the back of their toilet or they threw it on their coffee table, eventually they're going to pick it up. And it's the way I structured it was you could literally do a lesson in like 30 seconds.
Yeah. It's kind of like a libertarian daily devotional with memes instead of Bible verses.
Yeah. Yeah. So I definitely had that in mind. In the late 90s, I did some accounting for a Christian bookstore, and I had never seen devotionals before, and I saw devotionals at that time. So that was definitely an inspiration.
So you're one of the executive producers on the great documentary Monopoly on Violence. I don't think people really knew that. Like, I thought that was a Chris Kofer thing completely. And I knew that there were, I've interacted with a couple of the writers online, but I didn't realize that your hand was so heavily in it. How did you get hooked up with Stateless Productions, and are you able to reveal kind of what's coming around the bend? I know you guys are working on a new project.
Well, it was Chris's idea to do a documentary on anarchism, and he contacted Robert first, and he got Robert on board. And then they came to me and asked me if I wanted to be on board. And really, I mean, a couple of reasons. First of all, Chris isn't in Atlanta now, but we were all three lived in the Atlanta area. So we were all three local to each other. We could get together and, have meetings and talk and things like that. Also, the people that we wanted to interview for it, most of them I had already interviewed. So it was very easy for me to contact people and say, hey, we're doing a documentary. If we come to you, can you answer some questions, be in the documentary? And when it came down to it, I don't think Robert, or I think one of the main reasons why my name is like, when this starts, my name is on the top, is because I was responsible for a lot of the crowdfunding. When it came time to raise funds for it, I started blasting it out on Facebook, and I started blasting it out on Twitter. Now, neither of them has a Twitter presence. So between my Twitter presence, and I think I may have more friends than them, I don't know. But just, having that name, people knowing my name from the the podcast and everything. When I said we're doing crowdfunding for the documentary, and we put together that 1 minute video showing exactly what we were going to do, who we were going to interview and everything, I was able to draw a lot of people in to donate. And that was, something that from the start, I didn't know that I would have any kind of influence to do. But it turned out I did. And and then when it came down to doing like interviews and stuff, I wrote a bunch of the questions. And I remember the funniest one was Chris is driving on the East Coast to interview Maj Touré. So he's going to Philly to interview Maj Touré, and he's like, I have no questions to ask him. So I was at work, and I immediately and he's like, I'm like a half hour away. I'm like, okay, give me 15 minutes. Yeah. So in 15 minutes, I just like fired off, just hit a bunch of questions, and I sent them to him and everything. So, I wrote a lot of the questions that you see, when you see, like Jeff Deist talking in the documentary, he's answering questions that we wrote.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So I wrote a lot of those questions. Chris wrote a lot of those questions. Robert wrote a lot of those questions. The two, our other writers, Andrew and Killian and Bryce, they wrote a lot of the questions and everything. So, and then when we pretty much came out with the script for it, how we were going to structure it, I laid down like a framework of the narration, and I don't know that we used any of the narration that I wrote, and I had written narration for pretty much the whole thing, but I think it helped to just writing that out helped to be able to structure it and see how we wanted it to flow and how much narration. Then we decided I had put too much narration in there, and the narration that's in there now is actually the perfect amount. So, So, I mean, I was really, when I was brought on, understood to reach out and be sort of the face and everything for it, because I sort of had a face at the time. But I do like the input that I was able to give. But, when you're doing something like this, fundraising is really important. And I was able to pull that off. And on the next one, we're going to need more money than the way we're planning on doing our next documentary is we're going to need more money than we originally said we could do it for 15,000. That was way off. We ended up getting 25,000 in donations, thankfully. And then we still had more money that we needed to use on top of that. But on this next one, we've already overestimated, and on this one, people are actually going to be getting paid to be a part of it. No one who had anything to do with the documentary got paid on this, because there's no money. I mean, we have nothing. There's no money. Everything was used. And, but the people who are going to be contributing to this one, we want to make sure that they get paid, because it's going to be a lot of the same people who made Monopoly, and we don't want them to feel like they're working for free this time. So that's why we're gonna need a lot more money. And also, I will not say the name, but we also are looking at getting somebody pretty famous to do the narration, and that's going to cost the money. So that's going to cost some money too. So,
are you able to tell me what the topic is?
Oh, it's going to be on the police.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. So we already have a group that we've had a call and everything. We have a key-based group, and outlines are already being written, and pretty soon people are going to be reached out to, and the fundraising is actually going to be starting very soon. Do you
fundraise through Kickstarter, or do you do it on your own? How do you do that?
Indiegogo is the best.
Oh, great.
One of the reasons Indiegogo is the way to go is I think Kickstarter and certain other ones, you actually have to meet your goal in order to collect the money. Indiegogo, so say you say, hey, I need 100,000 to make this, but you only get 75,000. You still get to take the 75,000 and use it.
Yeah.
But where I think Kickstarter, if you say you're going to do 100,000, you have to hit 100,000 before you can actually get the money. So I believe that's how it was explained to me. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. I apologize.
I'm going to switch back to COVID, but also spirituality. You and Vin Armani recently did just this epic conversation on the dim age and entering an era of magic. And I'd like to know what the hell you meant by that.
Well, I mean, it's really not hard to figure out once you start trying to nail it down, is that facts don't matter anymore. Yeah. Statistics don't matter anymore. People don't want to see it. People want that elixir, that magic elixir, that they're going to inject into their veins, and it's going to chase all the demons away. There's really, if you cannot convince people with facts, statistics, logic, reason, a calm demeanor, what else is there to do? And people, they're looking for, when you start with the basis of the invisible enemy, the invisible enemy is like some kind of spiritual, you're almost talking about like spiritual warfare. It's mentioned. You can make the correlations very easily. Vin likes to talk about the Salem witch trials, where when you look at, oh, this person is asymptomatic, but they could be a super spreader.
Yeah.
I mean, that's really no different than the witches in Salem, where it's like, well, we're not really sure if they're a witch, but, let's still tie a stone to them and throw them in the water. And, if God doesn't save them, then they were a witch. And if God doesn't save them, they were a witch. If they were innocent, well, God's going to take them to heaven. You can hear arguments like that now. Yeah. There's no science behind anything that they're talking about. So what's it going to take? I mean, it's going to take things that are out of the ordinary and things that, would be almost embarrassing. It's like memetics or, what did Vin say? Like that 5-finger death punch video where it's like, that you have to almost entertain them into questioning what's going on.
Yeah.
It's like, it's really, you don't want to use Idiocracy because, I saw Idiocracy for the first time, 2008, 2008-ish. And I watched it and I'm like, man, if I ever have kids, my great grandkids are probably going to have to live through this. I didn't think I was going to have to live through it 12 years later. I didn't. I mean, we live in the most anti-intellectual age right now.
Yeah.
It's like, they don't want to know facts. They don't want to know. It's like, no, get the man in the white coat to come up there. It's like Vin said. What did Vin say on that episode? He said that, it could get to the point where like somebody's up at the front of the room chanting and it's like, this is going to take it away. This is how COVID's going to go away. We're going to chant, maybe wave a little sage or something like that around. And, and there's going to be some libertarian in the back of the room who's going to go, hey, this is going to, and you're like, shut up.
Yeah. Have you read this article by Jeffrey Tucker? It proves you wrong. Yeah.
It's like, shut up. If this is what it takes, if it takes them to believe in magic to think that this is going to go away, that this isn't a threat anymore, then let them burn sage. Let them, put patchouli oil on. Let them inject stupid shit into their veins. I mean, I don't want anything to do with it. I think the problem is that it's the technocrats. When you study technocratic history, it's everyone's going to have to be a part of it. Everyone's going to have to. If everyone's not opting in, they're not going to be able to get the kind of control they want. And Legal Man on Twitter has I'm going to have him on my show pretty soon. I'll probably release the episode. We're going to record this weekend, next week. He's really great. And someone Monica and Brad just started having him on their show recently. And I started listening to his podcast, The Quash. And a couple episodes ago, he was talking about the vaccine. And he's like, people think it's going to be like this grand, you're going to make this grand stand of if you come to the police are going to come and they're going to hold you down while somebody it's like, no, it's just going to be like, oh, you can't go to the grocery store.
Right.
You can't go to work. Your kids can't go to school. It's going to be that easy. It's like, I read an article 2015, 2016 about how gun control can work very easily. Mm-hmm. Well, we know you own guns and your bank account's frozen until you turn them in.
Yeah.
And they don't need to send cops. They just, we've all become such slaves to, it's like, my friend Farah put something on Instagram this morning about how supply lines for food can be cut off because of COVID and how many kids could be dying because of this overseas and everything. And I just snarkily, but no, I see there's groceries on the shelf at Kroger. These are lies. And that's what it is we're so reliant on other people for our sustenance, for everything we have. It's like, hey, if you want to eat, go to the grocery store. If you want water, either you go to the grocery store or you can have tap water. But still you're relying on somebody else for that. So yeah, I mean, it's going to be very easy for these technocrats. And I've been talking about, even before I started studying the history of the technocrats, I've been using that term for 6-7 months to talk about how, Dr. like Knut Witkowski, who I had, was fortunate enough to meet in New York and have dinner with and pick his brain and then have him on my show, how this is a guy who was head researcher at Hoover University. But he's not real. He's not a real doctor. No, it's only the ones that are paraded on TV. Yeah. It's only the ones that the entertainment, that the idiot box, the people on the idiot box, the entertainment box tell you they're the real doctors. Oh, couple doctors in California want to talk about how, vitamin D and sunlight and good health can help to prevent this and will help to fight it. If you do get it, it won't be so bad. No, those people, you have to take them off of YouTube. You have to tear them down. And you just, it's like we have the witch doctor. This is our witch doctor. You listen to our witch doctor. Your witch doctor is no good. Yeah. Your witch doctor doesn't know the spells that our witch doctor knows. And that's medicine right now. I mean, have you seen the reports of the people like in Britain who are dying from cancer because they can't get because they haven't been able to get cancer treatments in the last 6 to 7 months? And this is witchcraft. And it's really, and what it is it's murder. It's a culling. It's looking, I mean, right off the bat, when they started saying that this was attacking people who were like 80 years old and over, I immediately said it unapologetically. It's attacking the useless eaters. It's attacking the sponges. It's attacking the people who, it's almost like it was, and I'm not saying it was designed this way. I mean, most flus or coronaviruses that come along do worse on people who are immunocompromised and older people. But it's killing all of these people. So I mean, it's almost like they're happy because now no more Social Security for these people. No more. I mean, they've basically saved money by doing this, and then watching Walmart and Amazon and all these huge companies grow and their wealth increase while smaller businesses just die and disappear. I mean, this is technocracy 101, is where you're just going to have you'll have a couple suppliers, and they'll be the ones who they'll finally figure out. I posted something on Twitter yesterday. It was talking about, and it was from the Technocracy Study Guide from 1934. Basically says, there's so much wealth on the continent of the United States but it's spread out so unevenly. So what we have to do is we have to raise up a technate in order to be able to distribute it, to be able to distribute all of the, to make it fairer. Yeah. And that's what it's all about. And people don't see it. I'm like screaming from the rooftop, screaming from the mountaintop, going, hey, look what they're doing. Look how they're setting this up. Do you want to do anything about it? And people are like, no, take off the tinfoil hat, Alex Jones. No.
Is there any way that you see that people can thrive or even prosper in this coming era?
Yeah, a couple ways. Black market, supplying things that people are going to want but are going to be in short supply. Mm-hmm. And the same old way that it always happens. Get into bed with the state. Get into bed with the technocratic state. I mean, that's...
Gee, thanks, Pete.
Well, I mean, am I lying? I mean, the way this... Just look at the last 100 years since the progressive era. I mean, when somebody actually starts a business and is prosperous, it's almost like they're doing it despite the state. Because the state puts so many things in their way. It's like you have to be a genius or and sometimes lucky. I don't like the term luck, but sometimes lucky. But I mean, it's just gotten to the point where it's like, I mean, there are states right now who are talking about relocking down.
Yeah.
I mean, Ohio's talking about relocking down. Texas is talking about relocking down. I don't know, especially people in the libertarian ANCAP, whatever sphere, the ones who don't see what's going on 8 months down the line, I don't know how they're going to see what it's going to take at this point until it's, really police forcing people to be injected with stuff or stuff like that, which it won't come to. So if they do it the way I think they're going to do it, a lot of these people are just going to stay asleep until, they're, I don't know. I'd like to be able to make, like I said, I'm going to make more predictions once I know what the results of the election, then I will make predictions about what the future is. But either way, even with Trump, I don't, people say he's Batman. I don't think he's Batman. I mean, I just don't. I think he is a very self-interested guy who doesn't like a certain segment of this population, which happens to be the segment of the population that I pretty much despise too.
Right.
But that doesn't mean that I'm going to support him. I mean, the guy worships the military, worships the police. That's enough for me to be out. I mean, where are the pedophile arrests? Where are the frigging pedophile arrests that I've been hearing about for 4 years?
Yeah.
Come on. It's like, oh, well, they've had some arrests and big arrests. Yeah, well, they had arrests under Obama, too. They have to keep up appearances, so.
Yeah, it's not like the big names.
Yeah.
And it also, one other kind of benefit of Trump, I guess, is that it seems like he understands magic. I know the Dilbert guy, Scott Adams, was calling him a master persuader in 2016, which is the same thing. I mean, he understands how to cast spells. And I think also that's probably why he picked Scott Atlas, who has, he has no background in epidemiology or virology, but he is telegenic and he knows how to cast spells.
Yeah.
So I guess that would be one benefit of Trump winning this crazy election. Is that he's a countermeasure to the age of magic because he's part of it.
Well, sure. Yeah. And he can just say things. He just can put out a tweet and it's like he just put out a controlling spell over a certain segment of the population who now is acting in a certain way because he wants them to. Mm-hmm. And that's powerful. I mean, like I said, I want to believe, let me tell you something. If they do march the pedophiles out and everything, I'll be the first one to say I was wrong. I'm glad he did it. If he if he gives clemency to Ross Ulbricht and pardons Julian Assange and what's his name over there in Russia, Edward Snowden, I'll be like, okay, cool. Hey, he did a good job. I was wrong. I was wrong about him on this. Mm-hmm. But until I see that, I'm not going to pretend that. There's a whole segment of the population is like, just trust the plan. And I'm like, eventually, if you have a plan, you have to put it into action. And you can't do that overnight. So how has this plan been working? I remember they were talking about, who was the one who presided, the lawyer who presided over, Russiagate? Was it
Clapper?
No.
Mueller.
Mueller.
Okay. Yeah. Sorry.
Do you remember when Trumpers were saying that he was actually getting together he was putting together cases against Hillary Clinton, John Podesta, and that's what he was doing in secret. He wasn't working on Russiagate. He was actually doing this. Yeah, there were people.
No, I didn't. I wasn't part of that circle.
Trumpers were actually saying that was happening, and it's like,
wow.
You kind of got that one wrong. And you want to say that they got Russiagate wrong? Well, you kind of got that one wrong. So maybe you should own up to that.
Yeah.
Wow. So, yeah. It's pretty sad.
Cool. Well,
I try not to make specific predictions like that. I mean, I'm making predictions about what the country, what the society is going to be like very soon. But I mean, I'm trying to make them as broad as possible, and I also try to make them as bad as possible, so that when if it's not as bad, then I can go, I don't care if someone's like, well, you said it was me. Well, let's just be happy it was this way, because even half of what I think is going on, if that happens, we're all in deep trouble.
Yeah.
We're all in deep trouble.
I've got one last question before I let you go. What advice would you give to your sort of stereotypical libertarian who doesn't know how to exist in the spiritual realm because they're so cerebral? Because that's very important right now.
Go listen to Vin Armani. Yeah. Go to his channel, and I can't remember. I can never remember the name of it. He has a series of videos.
Oh, I mean, the Ascendant Project.
Yeah, the Ascendant Project. Yeah. Start with that, and give him 7 or 8 episodes and see what you think. Also, listen to the episode I did with him on the dim age. I think that was, is it 480? It's episode 478. But yeah, that would be my start with the dim age, episode 478 of my podcast. And then if you're interested in what Vin has to say, go to his YouTube channel and start listening to the Ascendant Project. I mean, it's long. I've been listening to it when I've been flying recently, because I've taken a bunch of flights lately. But it's real interesting when you start, when he starts talking. I mean, the problem with a lot of libertarianism is, one of the parts of libertarianism that I hate the most is the militant atheism part of libertarianism, because that just, to me, is ridiculous, and it's virtue signaling. If your whole thing is on libertarian Twitter or Facebook is to make memes saying that anybody who believes in a higher power or God is an idiot, well, as far as I'm concerned, you're probably a taint agent. Yeah, because you're just seeking to divide people, and then I tell them to go over and like the anarcho-Christian page, so you can see how people like myself, who read the Bible and know that anyone who's a Christian or believes in God should be an anarchist. I mean, by default, not even a question, by default. But the hardcore atheists are just the worst. But I think that's one of the big problems with getting people to understand that facts don't care about your feelings doesn't work anymore.
Right.
It just, I mean, yeah, you can own some people on social media, but you're not stopping the spread of totalitarianism, dystopianism, and this technocratic rise. And you're just not. And until you can figure out how to communicate in this age properly, you're just useless to us.
Another project that Vin worked on that I'll probably link as well is it's a podcast he did with a guy named Dave Butler, who I'm not familiar with, but I'd like to get him on the show. It's called Destination Unknown, and it's a series it's a series of 2-hour just conversations between them. They're getting progressively drunker as they're downing bottles of wine, and it's fantastic. I've been working my way through that for the last couple of weeks. The Ascendant Project is great too. I've been taking really extensive notes on that. I'd like to write some reflections on it, because I am one of those libertarians who even when I was religious, I wasn't spiritual. My brain just doesn't work like that. And I even go to my brain. Like,
that's most of Catholicism.
Yeah.
I grew up, I mean, I went to Catholic school. I graduated Catholic school. Yeah. So, I mean, I've studied, I know the Catholic Church. And I mean, there's spirituality is not, it's a lot about tradition as far as I remember.
We venerate our mystics, but we don't emulate them at all.
That's a good way of putting it. Yeah.
All right. Well, Pete, thanks so much for joining me today. Where can people find you?
Libertarian Institute. You can find me at any podcatcher, Free Man Beyond the Wall, themonopolyonviolence.com, and Twitter at Peter R. Quinones. It's Peter R. Quinones on Facebook. But I mean, you can find me on Twitter pretty much. If you hit me up in a DM on Twitter, I'll get back to you. So okay. I'm on Twitter a lot, unfortunately. But yeah, for the content, Free Man Beyond the Wall podcast and the MonopolyOnViolence.com.
And you're also part of the Unloose the Goose gaggle.
I was just going to say, yeah, Unloose the Goose. And that's a lot of fun. And I think that those are really informative episodes. I released one of their episodes on my podcast and talking about what happens if like mass rioting or civil unrest happens. And that's become a very popular episode. So
one thing I love about Unloose the Goose, and I'll let you go after this, but is that it takes a lot deeper dives and kind of collectivizes the knowledge of whichever group of the larger cast is there. Like sometimes Jack Spirko will release a podcast episode and then you guys will do just an hour and a half talking about one subject that Jack talked about in passing, which it's great. If, when it's definitely a podcast that I recommend to everybody. So, and then Pete, also, I've been a supporter of you on Patreon for a while. And
thank you.
Yeah, sure. I definitely recommend that to everyone who's listening to this as well, because, we got to help each other out and Pete definitely deserves it. Thanks again for coming on the show, and I will talk to you soon.
All right, man. Thank you.
All right. Thanks again to Pete Quinones for joining me for UrbanAgorist.com episode number 8. Once again, you can find Pete on all the socials, and actually he has recorded a couple of more conversations with Vin Armani about the dim age, which is probably the most fascinating topic on the stage today. So I'll be sure to link to all of those episodes in the show notes. And once again, don't forget that the Seed Summit starts tomorrow, November 17th. So get signed up for that. You can sign up using my link at urbanagorist.com/summit. And I will see you next time. Until then, live free.
This is the way